And yet it's part of how this story plays out. The truth is, what's upsetting about both of these stories is that Jacob is not a good person. He becomes, in the overall story of Genesis, he is the worst person. He's the worst hero, if you will. He's the anti-hero. There's almost nothing good about Jacob in Genesis. And yet he becomes a patriarch. He becomes an important part of the telling of the story of Israel. He becomes, you'll learn later, his name actually will be changed by God to Israel. The name that the people of God, this covenant people, this promise-keeping people, the name that they will carry from then until now, until today, will be this man's name. He becomes their namesake. He becomes their named father for all of their history, all of our history. We are, as Paul said, true Israel. And so how is it possible that this person of such low qualities, such low character, there's almost nothing redeemable in Jacob for us to hang on to say, oh, why? Why would God choose him? This is why I'm calling this series, the next 5 weeks, The Liar, because if you have to give him a name, you can't give him a positive one. His parents didn't name him a positive name. He didn't carry a positive name throughout the course of his life, and he lived into his negative name. It makes us wonder about lying in general. It makes me wonder about deception or low character, and it's inside of all of us. And even ask, why do we lie? Why do we scheme? Why do we hustle? Probably because there's something we want, something we don't have. And we think lying will get it to us. We lie because we think it will get us what we want, out of trouble, into success, freedom, into or out of some relationship. We lie to protect ourselves. We lie to get what we want. And here's the thing, if you do it long enough, if you lie long enough, you'll lie just because it's what you do. You'll actually stop knowing even why you lie. You just lie. Did you see the story in the news this week of there's a 34-year-old woman who enrolled in a Longview, Texas high school as a 15-year-old sophomore and went to that high school for 7 months as a sophomore? Now, some of you are like, man, I always want to go, what would it be like to go back to high school? I'd do it so much better. If only I could go back to high school. This woman did it. She was 34, and I guess she was working at McDonald's, and this older woman who also worked at McDonald's, she told her some story about her parents dying, and she needed a place to live. She said she was a teenager, so this woman took her in as like a guardian, and she said, well, I need to be enrolled in school, and so this woman, as her guardian, took her down to enroll at this Longview Christian High School or something like that, and enrolled her as a 15-year-old. She didn't even go for senior. She went for 15. She went to have a few years in high school, you know. So she goes in low at 15, and everyone believed it. The teachers, everyone. She had a boyfriend can you imagine that? She had a boyfriend. When he finds out later your girlfriend's 34, you know, it's like, ah! Obviously, she wanted something that comes from being younger or being seen as young and being seen again in high school. Apparently, she did really well in school, got good grades. I guess so. We lie because we want something. And everybody lies because everybody wants something. I remember when I was very young, I was probably 12 or something like that, was living with, at the time, my uncle, my mother's brother, younger brother, was living with us. He had come to live in our house for a season. I forget how long. He may have lived with us for about a year. And he stayed in my room. So I had twin beds, and so he was like my roommate. It was cool. He was probably 12, 15 years older than me, and so I loved it. I loved having him there. And one day he had to get a car. It was time for him. So he was car shopping. So we went to one of these I don't know, Toyota-thons or something like that. We had all these cars, and it was like going to be deals. And so it was like we went to the stadium or something, and I went with him, and there was this truck that I really thought was awesome. and he really liked it, but it was just way out of his price range. You know, when you get in those situations and then you're starting to interact with a salesman, you're in trouble. You know, you're on a slippery slope. Well, here's the thing, and this is going to date me. And so some of you that are old, you'll get this with me. But they were offering, if you bought a car that day, they were offering a free VCR. Now, you have to understand, this is like the early 80s, and they had just invented the VCR. Nobody had them. They were amazing. They were like this incredible piece of, new cutting-edge technology. And they had just created a video store near my house. And so you could go down, and for 99 cents, you could rent a video, like a tape, and you could stick it in this machine, and you could watch a movie anytime you wanted. It was unbelievable. And I was like, had to have that VCR. Guys, once I heard that if you bought a car that day, you got a VCR, it was on. It was me and the salesman versus my uncle. Now, I didn't say that. I wasn't honest about it. I wasn't saying, listen, you're in trouble, man, because we're going to work together to get this thing. He wants to sell a car because he wants a commission, and I want this VCR in our house. So this is why we're going to work together. And I worked him. And even then, it's kind of scary because I realize then what I was discovering about myself is that I can be very persuasive. And so I was just, yeah, this and that. And he's like, but I don't have the money. They wanted like $400 a month or something, a car payment. He just nowhere near, like didn't have a job or anything. And I talked him into it. And he went away with a truck and a VCR. He had a truck and I had a VCR. And to this day, 30 years later, whatever that is, to this day, he's still mad at me about that. He was like, what has just happened to me? Why am I in this car? He still couldn't afford it. It took him years to pay it off. It's like a burden that I put on him. What? No, I don't have do I still have the VCR? No. I would have said anything to get that VCR. Now, I don't like thinking of myself as a liar. You probably don't either. So when I lie, I make sure it sounds like the truth so that I can feel good about it. And lies do that, don't they? They do what they did to my uncle. They leave you with a VCR, the thing you thought you wanted, and a bill you cannot pay. A burden that will take years to cover. This is the story of the life of Jacob, who is, by all accounts, a troubled man, a man whose life is full of trouble, both in the sense of his lack of character, but also relationally. His life is just full of trouble. But God chooses him anyway. For some reason, God stays committed to that choice no matter what Jacob does. In fact, it could be said that a lot of Jacob's troubles are actually attached to the fact that God chose him. He wouldn't have this rift with his brother if God didn't say, I'm going to choose you to rule over your older brother. If God would have just left the world alone, just left things the way they should be, Jacob's life might have been a little easier. And the Jacob story is really about the problems that come from a family. And I think this is important for us. Abraham's struggle was like a vertical struggle. When we talk about his life, it was a story about a struggle with God, to know God, to discover God, and to look for an heir. And that sense of searching for promise, that's part of Abraham's story. It's very vertical. And being the first in something, Abraham is a forerunner. He's the first to believe, has its advantages. There's no one before you and no peers to jostle for promotion or attention, but in a family, and this is what God said he would give Abraham. He said he would give him descendants as many stars, as there are stars in the sky, as many sands on the seashore. It sounds beautiful and romantic until you have a lot of kids like I do. And you just think, what a horrible thing to say. I'll give you that many kids. I'm just like, I start to twitch just thinking about that many kids. And they all become teenagers at the same time. And it's like a Dante's Inferno of torture. But this is what God said. I just want to reinterpret this for a second. This is what God said he would give to Abraham, descendants. In other words, drama. He's saying, I will give you drama like the stars in the sky. This is a story, Jacob's story is a story about family, but it's a story about conflict, which is synonymous with family, am I right? It's a story about deception. It's a story about fracture. It's a story about competition and broken relationships. It's a story about brothers. And one of them is called liar. This story brings out the ugliness in human relationships and the ugliness inside our hearts. It shines a light, even from the birth story, the birth narrative, it shines a light on motive. Motive. Let's talk about motives for a minute. Why we do what we do. Which may not always matter to you, but it always matters to God because God can see beyond just the gestures. Look, I don't care what the motives are of the surgeon that goes in and takes out the mass. I don't care. As long as he does his job, I don't care whether he did it for accolades or whether he did it for money or whether he did it because he loves me. I don't really care about his motives, but I just want him to do the job that he needs to do. In the end, I don't care what the motives are of the fireman that goes and runs in and saves my child from a burning building, as long as he does the thing. And in some level, human relationships, motive doesn't really matter. But with God, they do, because God sees more than just what you do. He sees the heart. And that makes him the judge over all the earth. Not just because he can see every single action simultaneously, but because he can see within the human heart. And that's a frightening thing for many of us, because even some of the best things we've ever done, which other people give us praise for, God wouldn't. Because he knows why you did it. And he knows that your motives are corrupt and they're not so altruistic or selfless as you make on, or even as you believe yourself. It's a sobering thought. Proverbs 16:2, all a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the Lord. Motives are weighed by God. Jacob and Esau are twins, and so they offer us these twin possibilities. They offer us an immediate and fascinating contrast in motive. What I see is two extremes in motive, but both still wrong. Both still options for sinful motives. An important point here is that the text doesn't really allow you to take a side, because both Esau and Jacob are sinners, just in different ways. And they both have corrupt hearts in relationship to the birthright. They're just corrupt in different ways. In Esau, we see the sin, what I'll call the sin of apathy. He does not care enough about his birthright or about his blessing. He takes God for granted. He takes his father for granted, his place and his future. It is classic son of entitlement stuff. His is the sin of apathy. Of course, I'll get blessed. I could sell it for some stew because in the end, I'm just going to get it back anyway. It doesn't matter what deals I make. And in Jacob, we see the sin of ambition. If Esau has apathy, then Jacob has ambition. He cares too much for the achievement, too much for the birthright. So he schemes and he hustles and he does whatever it takes, sacrificing what is right to get what he wants, and that's classic younger brother stuff. What are we then? Which are you? Which do you maybe lean towards? Which are you tempted towards? Are you more tempted towards the older brother, the son of entitlement stuff, the sin of apathy, or are you more towards the sin of ambition, making it happen yourself no matter what the cost? One of C.S. Lewis's biographers tells the story. He actually spends the last few months of Lewis's life, he's with him and watches him actually eventually die. His name is Walter Hooper. And he tells a few interesting stories about the last few days of Lewis's life. And they were both literary men, and so they would often talk not just about Lewis's works, but about other people's works. And one of their favorite books that they shared in common, or one of their favorite works they shared in common, was by a guy by the name of Thomas Mallory, who wrote a collection, a series of stories about Arthur, King Arthur's court. It was actually called The Death of Arthur. And in these stories, if you read it, it's very old, but if you read Mallory, what you see is that there's always these tales of knights doing chivalrous things, doing great things, and without even maybe skipping a beat in the very next line or the very next anecdote, it's like the Lancelot comes in and he saves the damsel in distress, but then in the very next line, as if to uncover his motive, Lancelot says that he did it to win worship. As if there was no conflict there, no problem. And on the one hand, you want so badly to believe in Lancelot. You want so badly to hold him high, to give him some sort of heroic status. But once you actually see the reason why Lancelot saves the damsel, the reason why Lancelot goes headfirst into peril or headfirst into threat, is so that he can win worship for himself. And talking about that very thing one night, both Hooper and Lewis talking about Mallory's depiction of not just Lancelot, but all knights in shining armor. Walter Hooper asked Lewis if he realized that his own books, his own works, were actually winning worship for him in the world. If he knew that, even though it was never his intention, Lewis's intention, to write books about God and to write books about the world and about theology and about good things and to draw people to God, if in the end those things actually were winning worship for him. And Hooper, the way he tells the story, said he never experienced such pure humility in his life as he sat there in that sort of moment of pregnant silence with Lewis, and Lewis's response was, one cannot be too careful not to think of it. He was afraid, he was aware of that very mechanism and afraid of it. Because it is a danger beyond all others. Because even a selfless act can become a way that we try to win worship for ourselves. It's the motive behind the selfless act which God sees. And if in the end the act itself was selfless, but our hearts did it to win worship, God knows. He can see that really our real motive is to get glory for ourselves, and in some maybe twisted religious way to win spiritual advancement, so that people will say, look how committed they are, look how heroic or sacrificial they are. Every now and then when I'm looking at the news or something online, I'll click over on one of these sort of weaker, sillier stories, and I think it was something on Twitter or something. I clicked on it, and it was like reasons why your coworkers hate you, something like that. There's always these lists, like 5 reasons why your coworkers hate you, and I love that. So I just clicked on it. I wanted to see the 5 reasons why coworkers hate you. It wasn't about me, of course. It was about other people. And one of them, which I thought was funny, which I had never heard this term, but it was like number 3 on the list of why your coworkers hate you. It was called humble bragging. Have you ever heard of this? Humble bragging. It's like a thing. Humble bragging. Humble brag. To humble brag. Anybody know what I'm talking about? To humble brag, apparently, is to say something in a self-deprecating way, but it also releases some awesome thing about you. So it's a way of like saying something awesome about yourself, but to say it in a self-deprecating way. Like, I don't know, like to say, oh man, it's just, I feel so tired and so exhausted because I just way overdid it in my vacation to Hawaii. Or it's just so, I feel so dumb and like so unworthy because I've been promoted 4 times in the last year, just, I don't know how, why would they ever pick me, it's crazy. And it's confusing to people because it seems like, oh yeah, does he mean humble? Wait, what just happened? What? Is that humble? Was that? People do this, apparently. I guess there's like, now I saw these things like top 50 humble brags on Twitter. And it's like people that try to, oh man, I stepped in gum, on the red carpet. There was actually a person that did it. I stepped in gum on the red carpet. I feel so dumb. I stepped in gum on the red carpet. It's like trying to let you know where they are right now. We're deceptive. We don't just brag anymore. We're not just vain. Some of you are. And stop. But we do it in a way that sort of seems like we're not, like we're humble. Yeah, but we're not. We want people to hear about our achievement, our accomplishments. Why do we do it? Why do we do that? Because we want people to like us? Because we want people to admire us? Because we want people to pay attention to us? What is it? What's going on? What's our motive? To love us? What are we looking for? What is it that we need, that we think we're meeting when we brag and draw attention to ourselves and draw attention away from God? I'm asking you, Christian, because it's not something that we should do. It's not something that should be a part of us. Not so much to say that we ought to be so pietistic that we never make that mistake, but we ought to be so full in our heart, in our soul, so loved. We're not fishing for compliments. What are we looking for when we do it? You know what I think? I think we're looking for blessing. That same thing that Jacob was chasing. Blessing. Blessing, at least in Scripture, is a combination of favor, attention, success, commitment, love. It's this unique thing. The way that Walter Brueggemann puts it is this. He says, it is that thing that without the special words and gestures that bind that life to the precious past and the promised future. A blessing is those words and gestures that bind our lives to some precious past and some promised future. And I think we have a blessing deficit. I don't mean it in some weird prosperity sense. I mean it in this sense. Some sort of like a thing that a father does to their child. The passing on of something. The unspoken and spoken commitment. And no one wants to live an unblessed life, but we do. Partly because we are a generation of fatherless people. And it is a gift that a father should and can give to their children. And it's an interesting change here in Genesis because while Abraham's story is concerned with promise, Jacob's story is really concerned with blessing. What Abraham seeks is a promise from God. What Jacob seeks is a blessing. And this changes the dynamics of his life and his struggle because in Abraham's case, only God can give a blessing to Abraham. But in Jacob's case, blessing can come from anywhere. And so he starts seeking it anywhere. And so do we. The pursuit of blessing, favor, success. I mean, you could look for that in lots of places. And so we do. And we chase blessing. Maybe you've never used those words. Maybe you've never thought about it in this way. But I think a lot of the false pursuits of our life are chasing blessing. Because we chase what we don't have. We chase love. We chase success. We chase position. We chase fame. We chase intimacy. We chase money, peace. Whatever it is we think we lack, we go running, looking for it. But you never set off on a quest to find something you already have. You always go running looking for the thing you think you don't have. And this is the tragedy for a Christian. To go running and chasing after a thing, which I have to tell you this morning, you already have. No one wants to live a life that is unblessed. And of course, the problem is, maybe as Adam alluded to, is that the blessing here is won by deception. But this is not a story about morality. That's part of why we're confused by it, because it's not a story about morality. It's actually a story about God. And he's not deceived like Isaac is. And here's the scandal. He blesses the deceiver anyway. Even though they are immoral, and even though they execute an immoral scheme to get the things of God, he gives it anyway. Even people with bad motives can be blessed by God, because he's already decided to do it before you were born. So Jacob and his mom might think that they're scheming for blessing, but that's not the case, because they already had it anyway, because it was God's decision and not theirs. And therefore it was God's work, not their lying, that gets it. He already had God's blessing. He already had God's birthright, and so do you. Just put it on speaker. Let's just do this. Let's talk. Do you know that? You already have God's birthright. So stop scheming. Stop hustling. Stop striving. Stop bragging. Stop grasping. Last week I talked about the dynamic of the older brother inheriting everything. That is actually called primogeniture. That's what that civil sort of societal law is called, primogeniture. It's to say the firstborn son gets everything. And that civil law, that right, that the older brother must inherit his family's estate, primogeniture is not just the way things were done. It was the basis of social and legal order. It was a way of determining what is right and who had what rights. And it's also a way, and listen, it's also a way of destining some people to advantage and some people to disadvantage before they're even born. And when God makes this oracle that the older will serve the younger, he is upsetting that balance. From even before the boys are born, he's saying, I won't play by those rules. In fact, I'm going to change that system. He's causing a revolution in that system. And in so doing, he's destining Jacob to a life of conflict in the service of that revolution. He's destining Jacob to be the younger who gets served by the older, and puts him in a very compromising position, because he does not have the right of primogeniture. He cannot say, I deserve this. Instead, he becomes the one that gets everything and did nothing to deserve it. If anything, the whole of his life only proves he shouldn't have got it, and yet this was God's plan. And this is the point where you've got to really put your thinking cap on, because this is the revelation of the kingdom of God and of the gospel. Jacob and Esau will always now be at odds. The one with their natural rights and the one whom God has chosen. It is a rearranging of the blessing system. It is an inversion of blessing. And the unblessed of this world can now take comfort to know that they will be blessed by God himself. The failure and the fool and the fatherless and the faint of heart can take the deepest solace in the story of Jacob because he has chosen you. And he blesses you. When no one else does, he does. And you don't have to lie, and you don't have to chase it. And even if you do lie, and even if you do chase it, you can't run away from it. This is the same God who comes in the flesh of Jesus and was criticized by his detractors because they called him a friend of sinners. Look at him, they said. He eats and drinks with sinners. Disreputable, lost, foolish, horrible people. These are his friends. I like how Brueggemann puts it. He says, the God of Israel comes to sojourn with the unworthy and the unvalued until they are brought safely home. The God of Israel comes to sojourn with the unworthy and the unvalued until they are brought safely home. Jacob is a liar, more like the devil than he is like God. And God chooses him anyway. God chooses to love him, to bless him, to challenge the balance of power and our expectations on who should and shouldn't be blessed. You see, guys, if God only loves Esau, if he loves the good sons, then we might just be tempted to think that there are some who are outside the greatness of the ferocious love of God. But if he loves the liar, if he blesses him, then we understand. And it makes you ask the question, the same question the Pharisees asked, the same questions our hearts are asking when we read this story. Will you just let anyone into the kingdom? I mean, is there no standard here of goodness or rightness or something, please? You're just going to let anybody into the kingdom? That's right. Now you understand. Jesus blesses the crooks and the cheats and the liars and the schemers with his presence. That's who he chooses to eat with, to be with. Who he lived alongside, who he laughed with, who he cried with. And this is what so rattled the religious establishment. How can he do that? It's the same problem here. How can God do this? Choose the younger brother. And not just because he's younger, but because he's bad. The liar, the sinner, how can he do that? Because, guys, this is the scandal of the kingdom of God. A place that is only made up of younger brothers. Only made up of sinners and liars and murderers. There is no primogeniture allowed in the kingdom of God. Nobody gets in just because of where they were born, or how much money is in their bank account, or who their father was, or what skin color they had. And this is the revelation. We're all really the liar. You know, both brothers have sinful motives. The one is apathy, the other is ambition. But the truth is we all are liars, and we all are cheaters one way or the other. We're all heel grabbers. We're all excluded from the blessing. We're all sinners deserving judgment. We're not sons deserving inheritance. Get that through your head. And if you see that, if you admit that, then God can come to you and bless you, the undeserving. And then you get it all. Because you know it wasn't you, it wasn't your right, and there was no entitlement. It was all him, always him. Always about his love. The story is always about him. He sojourns with the unworthy until he brings them safely home. That's our story. And Jacob will be brought home. This is such a beautiful, and we'll play this arc out. We'll talk more about it. But Jacob will be brought home. God chooses the one who does not deserve to be chosen. And then he commits to be with him, to bless him, even though it will cause him some pain and suffering until he sees him safely home into his kingdom. And all that conflict in Jacob's life, the conflict between his brother, which will one day end in reconciliation between Esau and Jacob. The conflict that he has with his uncle Laban will one day end in a covenant that he makes with Laban. The conflict that he has with his wife over her barrenness will one day end with the birth of Joseph, the greatest character in the story of Genesis. The worst character becomes the father of the best. Because God chooses sinners because he wants to make something out of them. God is in the transformation business. So the harder the case, the better to showcase his talent. You ever watch those home renovation shows? Does anybody watch those shows? There's a lot of them out there. They do something. Let me ask you this. Do they take a beautiful home to renovate? Is that how it works? I mean, when they send those people out there to look for the right house to be on the show, are they looking for this house is awesome, let's pick this house? No, they pick the house that's the worst. They pick the story that's the worst. Because who wants to see a great house become a little better? In fact, a lot of us, I know I would, if I saw some beautiful mansion or something we're going to renovate this house, I'd be like, whoa, no, don't touch it. It's already fine. It's already good. And that's so much of our problems. The problem with a church full of people that are really Pharisees, that think they're actually fine, that don't really want God to mess with their house because their house is already looking good the way it is. The neediest people, the worst place, they make the biggest transformation possible. And that's a metaphor for the kingdom. That's what God is looking for. You say, well, Brian, what do I need to do? Go out and start dealing drugs so that God can really love me? And I mean, what do I really need to do that? No, this is the news for you. You don't need to go out and do something truly bad so that you can see a great story in your life. You're already truly bad. This is my gift to you. This is already the problem. If you're thinking, well, I don't have a great testimony. People say, I don't have some crazy, amazing testimony of how I got out of jail and stopped shooting people and whatever. I don't have any testimony. Listen, yes, you do. Yes, you do. Whoever loves much has been forgiven much. This is the issue is if you only love a little, it's because you don't think you've been forgiven much. The people that are forgiven a lot love a lot. The people that realize, man, this story, my life is a story of great depravity, of great failure. And when you see your life that way, you recognize just how amazing the grace and goodness of God is. But if you don't, if you think your story is I'm mostly a good person, just made a couple mistakes, and God, it was big of God to forgive me of those 2-3 mistakes, the one I made in 84 and the one I made in 97. That was, it was nice of God to do that, and I appreciate him for that, so, praise God. But no, that's not, I'm telling you, you are farther from the kingdom than any sinner is. You are so far away from the God of this kingdom, this inversion of blessing. If that's really the way you think, if you really dig into your heart and see the way you think, I'm not sure that you will be in heaven when you die. And I don't say that to be mean. I say that to be true as an interpreter of the Scriptures. That's what I think the Bible says. The only way to be redeemed is to recognize that you are not. To start from that place of lostness, depravity. And we all have to tell that story. And still, even now, to look and dig deep within our soul and to see all that darkness that's still there. Still trying to win the day and win worship for itself. What's the show where they have the bus and then they move the bus? What's the show? Extreme Makeover? Extreme Home Makeover? Yeah, that's not a person. Good point. Well, yours is going to be more like the makeover, the person makeover. I just want to, imagine in heaven one day, you're going to be finished. Like Jesus, God will have finished the work that he started in you, and there's going to be a bus in front of you, and there's all of us, all the cloud of witnesses, all of heaven will be sitting there waiting. They'll be like bleachers, and we'll be like, yeah, it's time for you, it's time for JP, and what's he going to look like? And oh my God, I don't know, what's he going to look like? Woo! And he's still going to have his glasses on his head. What's he going to look like? We don't know. And there's going to be a bus in front of you, and Jesus is going to be like, move that bus, and they're going to move that bus, and it's going to be, woo! And you're going to see the new JP, the finished JP. And everyone will cheer as they see what God has done in you. as the liar that you once were is washed away, and a creature so glorious, so beautiful, so perfect, that if we weren't in heaven, we would all be tempted to worship it. God is in the transformation business. He's in the renovation business. This is what He's doing inside of you now. And the farther you have to travel, the better for God, the greater the glory and the shock of it. All you have to do is stay with Him. And even Jacob's life on earth becomes a picture, a story of transformation, as the liar becomes the patriarch. And for thousands of years, we've referred to the Creator God now. We refer to Him as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We don't refer to Him as Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. We refer to Him as Abraham and Isaac and the liar. This is the God of creation. Joy, who now lives at the Creative Place, told me this story recently about a friend of hers who actually has his own kind of crazy story. Apparently he was notorious about 30 years ago in Tampa, and he was eventually arrested and given life in prison. And serving that life term in prison, maybe 10, 12 years in, he found Jesus. And Jesus, as He will do when we're in the place like that, in that place of real depravity, real lostness, took this guy and rescued his life. And then through some miracle, 24 years in, he got released. He got early release. And so he was out. Now a new man, rescued, whatever, and he knew Joy, and so I guess they reconnected some way. And Joy was staying. She lives now at the Creative Place. If you've never seen this, it's right there in Nebraska. It's an old hotel that we found, and it was dilapidated, and it was left alone. And through the generosity of a donor and a lot of volunteer effort from a lot of people, we rebuilt that place. We repurposed it. We redeemed it. And he came to pick up Joy for breakfast, and he came to pick up his old friend, and he stood there outside his car, and as she came out of her little apartment, which is like it's kind of like an L-shaped hotel and then a house in the front, and it's all been renovated now by Creative. It's beautiful. It's like a little park there in the middle of this. And as she came out, she sees her friend, this man, this murderer, this life sentence guy, just sort of there worshiping God in the middle of this thing, this place. And she asked, what's going on? What's happening inside of you? He said, do you know this place? Do you know what it was? Do you know what it used to be? He said, this is the Lindale. He said, 30 years ago, this was the most notorious place in all of Tampa. He said, this was known for prostitution and heroin and freebasing. This was the most evil place in all of Tampa. I myself did some of the worst things I've ever done in that apartment right there. And he pointed to one of the women's apartments that's now been renovated. And they went to breakfast, and even sitting there in breakfast, he just could not get over it. And he said, how is it possible that God could take the very worst place and make it the very best? This is the gospel. This is what God does. It's who God is. He takes the very worst and He makes it His. And sometimes it takes 30 years. And sometimes it takes somebody who's been in prison that long to just come out in the light of day and see what we cannot see, because that progress is so gradual, it's so incremental that we don't see just how miraculous it actually is. The kingdom will come one day, and it will not be filled with people who deserved to be there. Listen to me. Who walked around proud of who they are, where they come from, what they've accomplished. It will be filled with transformed people who are all shocked and overjoyed to be there. The kingdom is going to be filled with people who are like, seriously, can you pinch me? What am I doing here? How did I make it here? You remember when you heard the good news about Jesus? Some of you did this weekend. Remember when you said yes to that offer of life and love and leadership and friendship? Do you remember that He blessed you? that he put his hand on your head and he gave you heaven's birthright. And if you really understood that this morning, what that means, you would never run after any counterfeit blessing again. You would stay right where you are and you would dance. See, we run off after things because we don't think we have it. But if you found what you were looking for, you'd stop running and you'd start dancing. The best dances are when the pants come off. I mean, you don't even know what I'm talking about. And so you've been so happy, so excited, so overjoyed, so overwhelmed, so at loss for shame that the pants come off. Now, some of you can dance, and you're not going to understand this metaphor, so you're just going to have to sit this one out for a second. If you can, just be honest, who thinks I cannot dance? I just want you to be like, if it came time to dance, not cool, not good, I'm in trouble. Come on, let's do it. Don't be shamed. This is going to be good for you. Okay, those of you that can't dance, the rest of you, there's about another half of you that didn't raise your hands. You can't dance. Just trust me. You think you can. Ask a friend. I'm not talking about cool dancing. So if you can dance, you're good at dancing, you're going to struggle with this metaphor. I'm talking about the people that can't dance choosing to dance. Now, this is a different thing. This is like, you know you can't dance, but you don't care. You dance anyway because you can't stop yourself. That's what I mean when I say the pants come off. When the pants come off, it's not about what anyone else thinks. It's about, I have to just do this, and I don't care if I'm cool or look good. In fact, I know I won't look good. Now, I have to show you an example of this. So I'm not going to take my pants off, nor do I want anyone here. I want you to try this. I want you to do it as homework, just not here, not today. In the privacy of your own home, I want you to do this. But I have to show you this. This was at Christmas time, and this is Skylar. So this is my youngest son, and the pants came off. Now, he's just, some music came on, so I just asked Drew to put it to some music. You just need to see him do what I'm talking about, which is no shame, total freedom, whatever that looks like for a person. You have to go, sometimes you have to go back to being very young to see what it looks like. So this is me on my phone shooting just a thing of him with the pants coming off. So let's do the Harlem Shake. He did that for probably 15 minutes. Somewhere into it, I'm like, I have to record this. This is incredible. I don't record things, but I'm like, this is something to see. You know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about freedom and joy that comes from a clear conscience. Not striving, not from shame, but just unconditional love. The blessing of finally coming home to your Father's house and to having His blessing lay upon you. But there's nowhere else to run. When was the last time you took your pants off and just danced? And you don't just take them off, you use them. You know what I mean? Like you're flaunting the pants at the world. You throw them, you know? When was the last time? I'm serious. When was the last time you took your pants off and just danced? Can you even remember? I can. I was 16. And I did. I just took my pants off, and there was a park, and I was just running around with my pants off and just running around this park. I don't know why. And I was dating this girl named Heather at the time, and I was right outside her house. There was this park, and me and a friend we were like airplane running around this park with our pants off. and not all the way pants off, underwear, good. And just running around, swinging her pants around. And I went back to her place, knocked the door. She had locked the door. She wasn't letting me in. And she never spoke to me again. That's how we broke up. She went on to be like a collegiate swimmer, and she was amazing. She never spoke to me again. I remember trying to talk to her, and she's like, "I'm not gonna ever speak. Just get away from me." And so she never. And I remember that's the last time for me, because something dies in us, and we grow old, and we remember, like Adam and Eve, that we're naked, and we're ashamed. And redemption, transformation, means, at least in part, that we realize we are naked, but we are not ashamed. We are exposed. We are wrong, but we are not ashamed. You see, Heather was right. I am a fool, but I have been given the birthright of God, the blessing of God, and I am his fool. Invite up Melissa Clayton. You might say, and even if you went through Jesus' account, you might say, all this I get for being a failure. I get all this from God for just being a loser? I don't understand. What's the deal here? That's right. So what's the catch, right? What's the catch? What does God get? If I get all of this, blessing, birthright, all of this for just being a screw-up, what does God get in return? And I want to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you what God gets in return. You know, I'm fascinated by where phrases that we use come from. And there's a phrase in English that we'll say, maybe you've used it. We say, getting the lion's share. We say that, the lion's share. Typically, when we use that term, that phrase, you say, well, it's the lion's share, we mean the majority, the bigger share, the bigger proportion. But that phrase actually comes from Aesop's fables. It comes from very old, some Latin, some Greek. There's lots of different versions of these fables. The one in Latin I like the best. It's about a lion who goes hunting with a cow, a goat. I forget the third animal. A sheep. Cow, a goat, and a sheep. He goes hunting. The fable begins with this warning. Partnership with the mighty is never trustworthy. And so the lion makes a pact and agrees to go hunting with the cow, with the goat, and with the sheep. And once they've cornered and killed their prey, it comes time to portion out, to divide up the spoils of the hunt. And the lion says, well, the first portion will be mine, because I am the king of the beasts. And the second portion you will give to me, because I am your partner. And the third portion will come to me, because I am the strongest of all the animals. And then the fourth portion, an accident will befall anyone who takes, besides me. And the story plays itself out in lots of different versions in antiquity. But the story of the lion's share is everything, not just most. It's like when you go hunting with the lion, this is, I guess, the moral of the story. When you go hunting with the lion, he takes it all. He takes it all. We've come to use the term to mean the bigger portion. But in the fable, the lion's share is everything. Because he is the greatest animal, he gets it all. It's not a great metaphor for God, but it is a metaphor. It's a good term for what God deserves. And when it comes time to assess your life, to look at it, to portion it out to all the things that you think matter, your heart, your love, your devotion, your trust. When it comes time to divide up the spoils of your life, here's what I have to tell you. He gets the lion's share. He gets the lion's share. Every corner, every inch of you, every failure, every dream, every talent, every mistake, every misplaced word, every perfectly placed word, every relationship, everything. He gets the lion's share. I want you to bow your head for a moment as we come to the table. And I want you to think about what it means to be a people that are undeserving of grace, but get it nonetheless. A company of liars, whom the God of creation allowed his body to be broken and his blood to be shed so that you could know him, so that great renovation could begin in your heart, in your life, so that he could be glorified. And he wants it all. He wants all of you. He deserves the lion's share. On the night he was betrayed, once he had given thanks, he took bread and he broke it. And he said, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Eat it to remember me." In the same way, after supper, he took the cup and he said, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, shed for the forgiveness of sin. Drink it to remember me." I'm going to ask anybody in here who's an elder, I'm going to ask you to come up and stand alongside the other elders who are giving out the elements. I want every single elder in this building to come forward. Here's what I want to do. So just go ahead and do that now. If you're an ordained elder by us or by anybody, I don't care. Go up, stand by one of these stations. Here's what I want to do. Some of you in here have never been blessed by someone. You've never had a father or a mother or anyone put their hands on your head and just say, "I bless you with a future, with life. I connect you to a past and I connect you to a future." So I'm going to ask these elders to do that, not to pray for long, but if you want a blessing, I don't even totally know what that means, but if you feel right now in your heart, like, yes, I need that. I don't know that I have had that, or it's been a long time since someone has blessed me. And these guys will stand as proxy. There's nothing in them, but they will stand in as proxy today for God. They will take the role of Isaac, and they will lay their hand on your head and bless you. If you need that, if you want that, I want to make that available. So that this morning as you come forward for the elements, as you come to take communion, that also is available to you. That's another option for you, okay? So when you're ready, when your heart is ready, this is the body and blood of Jesus given for you.